Welcome to the Biz Gone Social podcast. We help entrepreneurs navigate how to get known, get customers, and get the edge over their competition. Here is your host, Lorraine Duncan.
So here we are on the Biz Gone Social podcast, and I am so glad to be here. And my promise to you is I want to give you just a little bit of verbal caffeine that's going to energize your business and your marketing. And because after all, don't you really want to be the business that everyone's talking about? I know I do. And I'm really so glad to have Ed with me. Welcome, Ed.
Hi, Lorraine. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on the show.
And could you tell my audience a little bit about what you do and who you serve?
We work with small businesses. I've been doing that for over 30 years. Lately, but over the past 20 years, the focus has been primarily on email and helping people get the most out of their email. Usually what happens is that people will do everything they can to get the most they can out of their email or list, and then we come in and we get more. So it's like found money for those guys, and everybody loves found money.
Absolutely. So I'm just curious, because you mentioned email, and a lot of the people that I bump into lately have said, "Oh, email's dead," and nobody looks at email anymore. And I always try to prove them wrong. So how important is you do a lot of stuff with client acquisition? How important is email in that arena, and how important would you say email is altogether?
Well, email is really important. It is still the most used communication channel on the internet. And as people say, is email dead? To me, it's funny. It wasn't that long ago when Facebook was down and people would use Facebook Messenger all the time. And when it was down, what were they doing when they were asking questions about what's going on with Facebook? They were emailing each other about what was going on with Facebook. So email is still a good backup for communication. And again, in B2B, it's still the primary form of communication. So email is alive and well. One other thing I'd say is email's making a real renaissance. Lately, we're seeing companies buy up newsletter subscribers, and The Hustle just sold, I think maybe 2-3 months ago, just sold their newsletter for $75 million. So email is on the rise for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said something that kind of intrigued me, and I'm just thinking about this whole email marketing. And I do remember thinking that, when we sign on to a platform, for instance, like LinkedIn or Facebook, we're using an email address. And so even the case in most passwords, usernames are always email addresses. So I can't imagine that email will ever be dead. But what intrigued me about what you recently just said is that people are buying newsletter subscribers. Well, how authentic is that? To do that?
Well, it's more effective than paid advertising. And the reason for that, it's easily trackable. So what they're doing is they're looking for subscribers in certain niches. And what they'll do is they'll buy the list. It's easy now for them to communicate with that list on a regular basis. They don't even have to change the format of the email much. It's typically what they'll do is kind of a two-step process. So the first step would be an email talking about some information that people may be interested in. And then people will click the link, they'll go to that blog page or a video, and that will put a tag on them showing, okay, they're interested in this information. So then they'll follow up with an email, which would be an advertisement about that situation. So maybe they'll talk about a problem in the blog post, and then they'll follow up with an email with the solution to the problem. And they know they have an interest in the problem, so they're sending them the solution, and it works really, really well. For us, we call it a needle in a haystack approach, where you're identifying people that have interest, and then you're providing solution to just those people.
Right. I get a lot of these messages, that are going right for the sale right away. What is the positives and the negatives of doing that?
Well, keep in mind that only 10% of the market is interested in buying at any given time. There's 3% that are in-market buyers, and there's approximately 7% that are persuadable. And then the other 90% are not interested right now. So if you send a sales message to everybody, 90% of the people are not going to be interested. Some of those people are going to mark the email as spam. Some of those people are going to unsubscribe. The best thing to do is to test interest first. So you send out an email that it's just information, something that no one would be upset about. They go, well, that's not interesting to me, so I'm not going to click the link. The ones that will, then they click, and then it's game on.
Yeah, it's interesting that a lot of people not only have, they do that on email, but they've actually moved it over to some of the social media platforms, such as LinkedIn, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people, it's like, LinkedIn to me, it's my sweet spot. So I want to create a relationship with somebody first. I just don't want to go right. I always equate it to being on the first date and going to kissing, because it's like, you don't really want to do that. I'm like, I get so annoyed when I get a message, like somebody just connects with me and then all of a sudden they're selling me something. And sometimes they don't even take the time to actually look at your profile. And you don't know how many messages I get. If you need help with your social media marketing, it's like, did you even look at my profile? But in, in your profile, when I was looking at your profile, you talk about client acquisition. And I know that when I'm watching Shark Tank, for instance, the sharks always ask, what's the cost of your client acquisition? How important is it to know that number?
It's really important because you could end up spending money on stuff that doesn't work that well. You had mentioned LinkedIn, and it's at the front end of my process for client acquisition, and I combine it with email. If you don't mind me telling you about a process that I came up with several months ago, and it started from an observation and some frustration. I call it content amplification. And the way it works is on LinkedIn, you have active people and inactive people. And it's not too hard to find people with interest. So what I first do is look for people that have an interest. And let's use email as an example. In email, there's several different ways that you could find out who has an interest in email. You could purchase LinkedIn Sales Navigator Advanced and use the buyer intent filter. You could look to see who's attending a LinkedIn event on the topic. You could see who's attending a LinkedIn event or who's involved in a LinkedIn group on the topic of email, maybe email marketing. So what I do is identify those people, and then I look for the ones who are active. And active meaning they're just posting regularly on LinkedIn. So that's my first criteria. The second one is, are they getting much engagement? I want to find the people that aren't getting much engagement, because if you post, you want somebody to like or comment on your post. So now what I do is I know I have somebody that has interest. My philosophy is no one's ready to buy until there's a trigger event that occurs. But when that trigger event occurs, they go from interest in a topic to wanting to take action on the topic. So now what I want to do is get in front of these people, position myself as an expert, all without selling, so that when a trigger event occurs, I'm the person they come to. So this is how it works. I start engaging with their content, and then I'll ask a question. So I'll comment, ask a question at the end. We get into kind of a public conversation. Then I'll ask them if we can connect, or I'll ask them if we can connect. Then we may DM back and forth a little bit. Then I'll say something like, hey, you have really good content, Lorraine. I like what you're doing. I'm perplexed that you're not getting as much engagement considering the topics you cover as you're getting. Would you like to support each other in our content? So what I mean is anytime I see your content, I'll like it and comment on it. And whenever you see mine, you do the same. Would you be open to do that? So
sure.
Yeah, most people will say yes. Why not? I'm not getting a whole lot of engagement. Somebody's offered to engage in my content. Yes. I already have people that engage with my content already. So now what I'm going to have you do is you're going to come to my page, look at my content. There's several things you're going to see. First, you'll see my profile is pretty well laid out. But second, when you look at my posts, you're going to see people saying nice things about me, talking about how smart I am, talking about that I'm an expert, ask me questions that I can answer to look smart. So you'll see all of that. And then you're more likely, because of what you're saying, to comment favorably about me. Now, all the time, I'm complimenting you with my comments on your post. So you feel inclined to do the same for me. Now, over time, because you've made these public comments about me in a positive way, when you have that trigger event, unless you're a big hypocrite, you don't look like a hypocrite at all, you're going to turn to me to fix your problem. I didn't have to sell you on doing that. I let the people who are commenting on my posts do all the heavy lifting. All I had to do is show up. And if I got impatient, all I need to do is figure out a couple of things that might trigger you to go from interest to action on the post that you're going to comment on. And you may get the idea, hey, I should do that. And then you'll reach out to me and say, hey, could you help me with this? And that works extraordinarily well.
So what would be an example of, for like some of my audience that's not too LinkedIn savvy, what would be an example of a trigger event?
A trigger event would be something that would occur naturally in a business. If you have some idea what the sales cycle is of some business, then you can kind of time your outreach to that sales cycle. For example, I had a client that sold display units. These very expensive. They ran from a couple $100,000 to several $1 million to corporations. And so he would just go to these conferences and try to sell his displays to the people. And I go, wait a second. They may not be interested in it right now. They usually buy these things just before product launch. And that would be the trigger event. So let's find out when they're going to have a launch, see how far out it is. So get to know somebody who can give you some idea of that. And then let's figure out what the lead time would be, because they're not going to order it too early. Let's figure out if it's a couple of months out. That's when we want to start interacting with them, because we know in a couple of months, they're actually going to make this purchase. So that's one way to time a trigger event. Another way is you just wait. And it'll occur, especially for one of the things we do is email deliverability. Everybody has an email deliverability problem at some point. Or you could subscribe to their email list. And when you see an email's gone into spam, instead of reaching out to them and saying, hey, I noticed your email went into spam, you go through these content amplification steps. So you're building trust and know, like, and trust you during that period. Then you can bring it up. Now, it doesn't take that long. Once we start engaging with each other's content, it might just be 2 weeks before you feel comfortable enough with me that I could casually mention, hey, I was on your newsletter list and I saw that your emails are going into spam. Well, you've commented on my posts for the last couple of weeks. You've seen all these people say nice things about me. You've seen me give smart answers to questions. You're pretty comfortable now saying, hey, could you fix it? As opposed to if I went to you directly after I saw your email was going into spam, you might think I might have had something to do with it. So it's the ability to develop trust in a time now where people are really cynical about other people, and cynicism is at an all-time high and trust is at an all-time low. And you got to keep that in mind when you're reaching out to people.
Absolutely. It's funny. We all get spam, messages going into spam and emails going to spam. And I actually don't see a way that some of that can be fixed, because sometimes it depends on what email they're using. Like I noticed that like a lot of people who use MailChimp, they always go into my spam. And basically, the only thing that I can do on my end, for instance, is whitelist it. Like, just put it through that their email always goes through to me. But I didn't realize that you could actually correct it on the other side.
You can. There's a lot of things that could be done. Usually the first step is we look at their security keys to make sure that they're properly authenticated. A lot of times they aren't. Some people will use the easiest process is to click automatically set these up. And you think, okay, well, I pushed automatically set them up and it should be set up right. Sometimes it doesn't. There's things that are always changing. We're working with a client right now where Google has flagged APIs. These are big people that do a lot of mailing where they have their own API and they're buying emails in groups. Well, they're flagging all these emails that they've bought for a specific API, and all of those emails go to spam. That's the reason it's the reason why the client reached out to us. But they didn't know that, and we had to investigate it. Things changed. It went from all of their emails getting into the primary inbox to just 2 weeks ago, all of them going into spam, and they had no idea why it was happening. But we've done this a lot. Our team has over 30 years combined experience in email deliverability issues. So experience really helps. We can kind of figure out where to look, where other people might not have any idea where the hidden problem is.
I love that. I have a lot of people that always ask me about email deliverability and stuff. So hopefully they're listening today because they need you. So interestingly enough, that one thing I always tell, like when I'm doing like email marketing and stuff, and when somebody says to me like, oh, it's like, I can't stand getting all these emails all the time and blah, blah, blah. But what I've noticed, even in my personal experience with email, is that I actually have to physically go and delete my email. And every once in a while, I tell everybody this all the time, I've bought stuff in the delete mode, meaning I went through and I deleted, I saw a headline that captured my attention and I opened it. And so, two things I'm going to ask you. Number one, how important do you think headlines are when it comes to email marketing? And then I'll stop at that, and then I'll ask the other question.
Sure. The subject line and the preview text, so the text that you see next to the subject line, are the two most important parts of getting the email open. And there's one other part that's kind of critical. So it's, who is this? What is this? So if they know who you are, if they're subscribing to your email, they probably know who you are. Then comes the headline and the preview text. That's usually the first sentence of the email. So if you get those two right, you've got a really good chance of getting the email open. For example, I get over 600 emails a day into just one of my accounts. I might open 4 or 5 of them, so less than 1%. And it is the subject line and the preview text, which is the difference between whether I open it or not and if I know the person. If I don't know the person, then you better do a really good job with your subject line and preview text. Here's just a tip for anybody that's doing those. You want to write subject lines and preview text for mobile devices, because over 65% of all emails are open on a mobile device. In a mobile device, you've got about 5 words that'll show up in the subject line, and then the rest is truncated. And you have another 5 words that'll show up in the preview text, and the rest is truncated. So you want to keep your subject line as short as possible, 2 to 4 words max, and then your preview text. Sometimes if I've got a preview text that says 6 words, I'll put it above the salutation. So they'll see that. They'll see the subject line, they'll see the preview text, and then the salutation. And then that draws them in to open the email.
Yeah, I love when I get an email that has all that, because sometimes the preview has actually gotten me that, the line underneath has gotten me to open up. So a lot of people talk, I just want to briefly touch on this, and then I have actually one more question left, but a lot of people talk about open rates. What is a good open rate today? Because I get that asked all the time.
Yep. I've got a really good answer for that. And this comes from talking to dozens of heads of email deliverability for different email service providers. And it is what I call the 30 rule. So if you're sending in bulk, you need to have an 8% open rate within the first hour. And you need to have an average all open rate of 30%. And those are minimums. Like every single one of my clients, because of the way I show them how to structure their email, how to write their email and make sure that it gets delivered, have at least a 50% open rate. Usually it ranges from 50 to 70% because we're doing all the things right. And that could be a big difference in whether and how much profit you make. So you could take somebody that's getting a 50% open rate, we move it to 60, and you'd say, well, that's just 10%. Well, no, it's actually more than 10%. It's a 20% increase from 50%. And you take that 20% across an email campaign. Let's say that you have 6 emails in the campaign. You've got this kind of exponential effect that occurs with each email. I've had clients that have seen that 10% jump from, say, 20 to 30, 40 to 50, actually see up to 600-700% increase in sales because of that. It really is incredible. Like if you compare email to any other form of marketing, any other marketing channel online, it's not even close. Email has a 40 for every $1 you spend on email. If you do it right, you get back $40. The next closest one is maybe 8 to 1.
You mentioned this before, but do you, is it okay to actually buy email lists, or is it something is it a taboo, and should we stay away from that?
You can buy email lists for what would be considered cold email. And that's the one thing that a lot of people get confused with. Subscription email is the only type of email you can use for email service providers like Aweber, ActiveCampaign, Constant Contact. They need to be double opt-in. And you can get away with single opt-in, but if you look at their terms of service, every single one of them requires a double opt-in. They really only enforce that if your open rates are lower and you're getting a higher number of spam complaint rates, bounce emails, and unsubscribes. So if you fall within that range, that you're fine doing a single opt-in. And you could probably add emails to the list. And I wouldn't advise it, but you probably could get away with it. The other way to do it is what would be considered cold email. So you would purchase an email account from either Outlook. There would be a business account from Outlook or Gmail. And then there are cold email marketing apps that you can use. They're usually around $50 a month. And you can send anywhere from 50 to, on the high end, 200 emails a day using those apps.
Right. What can you name one of those kind of apps, just in case my audience doesn't know what that is?
Sure. One of my favorites is Lemlist. And there's another one called QuickMail, which is kind of sophisticated, but there are a lot of them out there. There's more on the market all the time. They're pretty affordable and they do a good job. You do have to clean the list. That's one of the things you want to make sure you do. And a good company for verifying emails is a company called ClearOut. So if you're going to do cold email, you want to run everything through the verification list and only send to verified emails. So even when you buy a list, there's probably only 60% at best of the emails on that list that will be verified. And those are the only ones you want to mail to. The rest of them you can't use.
Yeah, that makes sense. I once did that. I was going after a certain niche and thinking that if I was going to specialize in this, and I bought a list, and I forget what platform I used to do it on, but it was a cold list platform that somebody had recommended to me, but I didn't even know about the whole verified thing. So that probably explains why I didn't have great success with it. So I don't want to leave without asking you this question, is that, AI is the talk of the town. And it's trending. Everybody's using ChatGPT or Copy AI. And I mean, quite frankly, I've been using not ChatGPT, but Copy AI before they actually introduced, and I like it. And it's already started to capture certain things that I say in my voice, which is a little scary, to be honest with you. They're going to take me over and I'm just going to be a bot someday. Who knows? But how important is it important when it comes to actually email marketing? Because I could just go on and I'm going to talk about this subject and they give me a whole bunch of titles that I can use. So, what's your thoughts on AI and how, this is really just progressing into something bigger and better and more robust?
Yeah, AI is really, really changing the landscape of email marketing. Copywriters, the way that they work with copy now, it's going to be more of understanding how to be a prompt engineer and edit copy. I've got a product called Hypnotic Emails, and it writes really, really good emails. What I say is that I can turn anyone into an A-list email copywriter in less than an hour. And you're using ChatGPT and Bard, and it's understanding how to set up the prompts in the right context so that you can write really, really persuasive emails and keep it in your voice. So that's one of the problems that I see with a lot of the AI copywriting tools. It's easy to detect it's AI. And by time more people are exposed to AI copy, it'll be really easy for people to see, oh, that's an AI generated email. You can see it with LinkedIn comments. I can tell the difference between a LinkedIn comment that was AI generated and one that wasn't. In this process, because we go through prompt layering, you can't tell. It is as good a copy as you'll find anywhere. And the nice thing about being able to do this type of thing, emails that would have taken me maybe 2 days to write it, think about it, refine it, maybe rewrite it, I can now do in like 10 minutes. So in the past, we were doing list management services for companies, and we got away from it and did more consulting because the copywriting was just taking so much time. But we've gone back into it now because we can create the copy so much faster. So we can work more on the strategy and less on the copy.
Yeah, I have this software that I use that tells me if it sounds human generated or, and it's so funny if I change things around. So like this one paragraph that was like, I just tested that and it was like, and it was funny. One time I actually did my own writing and it said it was bot. It wasn't human generated. It was actually my own paragraph. So I'm like thinking, well, maybe this isn't too accurate, but, yeah, on LinkedIn, I definitely can tell what is and what isn't. And some of it, I just read it. If it's not interested, sounds boring, then I have to know it's a bot.
Yeah, I've had people ask me about some of my posts, and I go, what do you think? Was it written by a bot or written by me? And just because I'd bring it up, they would start to think about it. But as they looked at some of the replies to comments, somebody might say, well, did you write that? And I go, yeah, I did. But that's the problem, is that now that we've got bots writing comments, writing posts, now people are far more critical when they're looking at your writing. And so I do put more of my personality into my writing. I use more humor. A lot more humor than I did before. And humor is one of those things that people don't use in their content as much as they should. But if I look at going back to LinkedIn, some of my most engaged posts that get not only the most engagement, but the most reach, had a lot of humor in them. And yet that in ChatGPT and AI just doesn't do a good job of reproducing humor. It falls flat.
Yeah, I have a setting on one of my AIs that I use that's called friendly, and that's the closest it gets to me. But I did this, I got so much, it trended so well, and I got so many hits and people commenting and sending me emails and stuff. I did this post called Rent a Baby, Get Things Done. And it just and this was all evolved out of me taking care of one of my grandchildren, who was a 1-year-old. Mm-hmm. And I had to be so structured. And especially when it came to client fulfillment, meaning if I had to do things before I was on duty and things when I was off duty. And then I had to take advantage of like doing podcasts and stuff during his nap time, which always didn't work out. And he's been on quite a few of my podcasts. It's amazing. But here's the thing. And one of my clients wrote me, "Oh my gosh, that's so you. That was so your personality. Was that you or was it AI?" And it actually was me. But as part of like the structured part where I said, you could rent a baby for not like I did $9.99 or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And you get this, and this. And if you could have a boy or a girl, I got that from AI because I wanted it to sound more commercially, just because I was making fun of like renting a baby. But anyways, and I advise them not to do this. This is not something that should be practiced at home. Rent your baby out. But anyways, it was just a fun little post and I had a lot of fun with it. But a lot of people don't they're so professional that they don't bring, everybody has humor. Sometimes if you're from the Northeast like me, I could be snarky but it's funny, or I could be sarcastic. And I think it's really important that we do use humor in our marketing. I always ask this, if you've listened to my show before, I always ask this at the end of my show is, if there is one piece of advice you can give a struggling business owner, what would that be?
The biggest piece of advice I would give a struggling business owner is not to try to do everything yourself. Be open to advice and work with an expert that can bring the experience to fixing your problem that you just don't have. And if you do that, you'll find that you will get farther faster.
Absolutely. And I've learned that myself and struggling just to decide if I was going to hire somebody. And it was the best thing I ever did. And it's kind of like that whole thinking of, do what you do best in your zone of genius, what you're passionate about, and delegate the things that you're not so good at.
Absolutely.
So if somebody resonated with you today, how did they get in touch with you and, all that?
Well, the easiest way to learn more about me is go to everybodylovesfoundmoney.com, because we do find money in people's businesses.
I love that. What made you decide to go with that title, by the way? Just curious.
It is because when we're doing any email problem, what we find is found money. It's going from maybe $5,000 a week with their list to $20,000 a week, especially when they thought they were doing everything they possibly could to get all they could out of their list. And yet we found some things that could quadruple their sales. So they look at it as found money. That's why everybody loves found money.
I love it. Well, I want to just thank you for being a guest. This has been truly inspiring. And also I learned so much from you. So thank you so much. And
thank you so much, Lorraine, for having me on. It's been fun.
And to everyone out there, until next week, I'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Biz Gone Social podcast. Find us on Instagram at BizGoneSocial for extra tips. Check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, stay social.